Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story that I read, one that has grabbed my interest as it is Short Story Tuesday. It is a short story about death and finding out that your loved ones were not all that they said they were. I'm referring to Let's Tell This Story Properly by Jennifer Nnam Makumbi, which was published in 2014. For those who don't know, Jennifer Makumbi is a Ugandan British author who is fairly new. She got her work published in the past, or most of her work's been published in the past 10 years, at least in the mainstream. I don't know why. Like she was born in the 1960s, so her wiki said that she's been publishing since she's been writing since she's 15, and I don't know why she wouldn't have gotten anything published since before 2013, unless she's another victim of racism in the publishing industry, which it could be. But I just found that to be a little bit interesting. She writes novels as well as short stories, which have won a number of awards, including the one I'm talking about, which was shortlisted for a number of pretty prestigious prizes, which is always nice. And she frequently writes about Uganda as well as women's stories as it pertains to immigration and marriage and stuff like that. So pretty interesting author, and I do have to say that I enjoyed her story, or enjoyed the short story. So I look forward to reading more books from her down the road. So without further ado, let's tell this story properly. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Let's Tell This Story Properly focuses on a woman named Nnam, who is living in Manchester, England. At the beginning of the story, we learn that she is grieving the death of her husband, who died suddenly in the bathroom. And we learned that she is also doing a lot of cleaning her house, trying to scrub the memory of her husband, which we don't quite know why until the story progresses. She reflects on her marriage, and she reflects on what happened during the funeral that led to why she's doing what she's doing right now. And we learned that when she got to Uganda to do the funeral and the wake and everything like that, her father told her that Nnam's husband, Kaida, had an ex-wife and 2 children, which Nnam knew about. What she didn't know was that he was still married to her, and that he had additional children with her whenever he would revisit Uganda while she was still in Manchester. And so this creates a number of worries about who's going to inherit the house that's in Uganda, as well as feelings of shame and sadness because the man that she was married to was lying to her. And she also feels kind of like the other woman in this scenario, but the other woman probably feels that way too, because who is to say who was the first person to be the wife in the scenario? Not that it even matters. What matters is the fact that Kaida cheated on both of these women. Ultimately, a bunch of women and mourners hold a vigil, where they confront the death of Kaida's death, but they also confront what he did to these women, both noting that they don't deserve the ire of anyone in this situation, and ultimately coming to the conclusion that the children are innocent in this scenario, that they will stand to lose the most if petty grievances are enacted or something like that. And so they ultimately decide that the children are going to be taken care of, especially because Nnam stands to gain the most because her children are sons, whereas the other children are daughters, and under Ugandan inheritance laws, things become murky for the daughters in that scenario. And then Nnam presumably goes back to Manchester, where she begins cleaning, which is what we learned she was doing at the start of the story. She throws out a bunch of stuff, including the memories she had with her husband. And as the story ends, she tries to fight back some crying. She is still she's still grieving in this process. In terms of analysis, Makumbi gives us a lot to think about here. Jam-packs quite a bit in this short story. One interesting element of this short story is that of death and grieving. This kind of seems like it's going to be one of your typical stories of someone trying to get over the loss of a loved one, but then Makumbi throws a wrench in the works and shows that not everything is as it seems, which I appreciate. But you do see Nnam mourning the loss of her husband. She clearly loved this man, and to find him suddenly dead in the bathroom was pretty hard for her. So she's dealing with a shattered life at the beginning of this story, just trying to get through the funeral so that she can maybe move on with her life and be in a better place emotionally. But her grief is interrupted in this scenario by lies and by family drama. Nnam learns that her husband actually had a whole other family. She already knew about this woman. Kaida probably told her that he had divorced this woman, and that was that. But clearly that was not the case, and so she's learning that the man that she loved harbored another life entirely and was cheating on her while they were married, and things were particularly difficult. And to add all this, there's the family drama where Nnam doesn't know if her children are going to be taken care of, if the house that she bought with her money in Uganda is going to be if that's going to be honored, because it might be passed down through the family, and if the ex-wife and her children get everything, then she might be left with nothing. So there's a lot of worries going on in this story, a lot of anger and frustration and grief, and she's not allowed to feel this grief that she's going through because she has to deal with everything else, and that can be really hard. And you can see at the end of the story, like, she's finally allowed to grieve once she cleans everything up and throws away her husband's things that she doesn't want anymore. Like, she's allowed to grieve at that point, but it seems like this grief is deferred initially. And she also has to deal with these other conflicting feelings as well, feelings of betrayal, feelings of anger. So it's like, although she initially wanted to mourn this man, he's proven himself to be something else entirely. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you from this. "It was then that Nnam's eyes betrayed her. She glanced at the open coffin. There is no sight more revolting than a corpse caught telling lies," which is a pretty amazing quote. One of the better quotes that I've read from a story. Like, there is no more sight more revolting than a corpse caught telling lies, meaning that she looked at her husband as he was lying in his coffin, and she's like, "Who are you? I don't know who you were anymore. We had a life together, but that life was clearly a lie. And now I'm left with nothing, just our children and the children that you apparently had with another woman." And it's very frustrating for her, but it hurts so much. It's a pain. It's a feeling of betrayal that's going to leave her forever changed and make it hard for her to maybe trust people in the future. Another element of this story that I think Makumbi does pretty well is with the feminist elements in this story. You see the frustration with the cheating, the patriarchal society that teaches men that they're allowed to play the field. That feels evident in this story as a number of the women are frustrated that the cheating took place. And I don't think there's any initial anger with the other women in this scenario, like the original ex-wife and Nnam in this scenario. Like, she does feel kind of anger, but it's more like, why did he choose you over me? And ultimately, like, this leads them all to realize that, like, it's not them who are to blame. It's Qaeda, who chose to have two different families in two different locations, and take advantage of both of these people. And that's where the frustration needs to be, which is what I think Makumbi is really getting at here. She's just trying to point out that in these situations, it's so easy and it's so tempting to be mad at the person who, was part of the affair but is no longer alive. It's so easy to blame the other woman in this case, but it takes two to cheat. And, it's... so the man in this scenario is equally to blame. But it also seems like Makumbi is kind of calling out Ugandan culture and how it complicates matters. You can't just simply be done with the other woman in this scenario. You can't really move on from that. Like, there's still the problem of inheritance, and Makumbi notes that that Nnam has two sons, and the other woman has two or more daughters. So it's hard for her to get that inheritance because she has daughters. But does that mean that she's simply going to be left on her own, not even realizing that her husband was cheating on her with this other family, and so she's going to be given nothing at all? It's really, really sad and really unfortunate that Ugandan culture would allow this to happen. Ultimately, they're able to fix the situation, but this might happen way more often than I'm aware of. And it calls into question, like, why have a system that's built like this that would allow for people to be thrown out of their house, especially when the person who's dead in this scenario would, you can't hold them accountable for their actions anymore because they are dead. And you also see this with the women's vigil in this story, where they pretty much acknowledge, like, let's tell this story properly. There are two innocent children in this story. Innocent. There's more than that, but there's innocent children in this story, and we can't simply place the blame on the women because they have to raise those children. They have to deal with the after effects of this affair that took place, which I think is very fascinating and very nuanced writing on Makumbi's part. I also think it's pretty fascinating how she does try to bring in some class elements into this story. I do think it could have been further developed, but she makes a point to note that the other woman in this case, the ex-wife, is from a peasant class, whereas the Nnam seems to have made a bit of money for herself and comes from a higher class family. She was a landlord type, and how, like, Nnam's family kind of looks down on the peasant side of the family, and that's an added element, that it would be so easy to push them to the side because maybe they're already marginalized in society. But she doesn't really do anything else with that because it seems like happily resolved, apart from Nnam ending up pretty sad in the story because of what have happened to her. But it is an interesting element that should be considered as we evaluate these types of situations in this type of writing. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Let's Tell This Story Properly by Jennifer Makumbi, a pretty solid short story. One of the better ones that I have read recently, and one that I am going to recommend to you out there. I will put a link to it in the description so that you can find it, read it, tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a discussion about this pretty quality short story. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story if they don't already know. And this author as well, who seems to be, Jennifer seems to be a pretty quality writer. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and cheating travels. I guess, don't cheat on people and have a second family and then die suddenly and not have any of it get resolved. That'd be pretty weird. Farewell.